The Marshall Auditorium at American University in Washington, D.C., hummed with anticipation. Its semicircular rows of 70 seats, bathed in soft golden light from overhead fixtures, created an intimate yet charged atmosphere. The small stage, framed by dark wood paneling, held two gray upholstered chairs, a square wooden table, and three spotlights casting a warm glow. The event, part of the Voices of America series, promised a lively discussion on a question that resonated deeply in a nation grappling with division. What does education mean today? The auditorium filled steadily, with students, professors, and community members settling into their seats. Murmurs of excitement rippled through the crowd, punctuated by the occasional rustle of notebooks or the soft glow of phone screens. At the back, a young man in a denim jacket sat alone, his hair neatly combed, his posture upright. His face carried the resolute look of someone raised in a small town, perhaps in New Hampshire, where words were chosen carefully and actions spoke louder than rhetoric. He wasn't on the guest list, not a speaker or debater, but his presence seemed to carry an unspoken weight, unnoticed by most. The moderator, Daniel Carter, stepped onto the stage. A seasoned journalist known for his ability to navigate heated debates without losing control, Carter had interviewed everyone from tech moguls to factory workers. His gray suit and calm demeanor set a professional tone as he welcomed the audience, his voice steady and warm. He introduced the topic and the two speakers, gesturing first to Jasmine Crockett, who emerged from the wings with a confident stride. Jasmine, a congresswoman and lawyer, wore an elegant black outfit, her hair pulled into a high bun that accentuated her natural poise. Carter described her as a voice for forgotten communities, someone who spoke with the authority of experience. The audience erupted in applause, with a group of young students in the front row nodding as if they'd followed her work for years. Her presence was magnetic, her smile both warm and sharp, hinting at the wit she was known to wield in debates. Next came Caroline Leavitt, introduced as the youngest White House press secretary, unafraid to spar with opponents. Dressed in a light gray suit, her loose hair framing her face, Caroline moved with measured steps. The applause for her was enthusiastic but brief, concentrated among a small group on the right side of the auditorium. As she took her seat, Jasmine glanced at her, not with hostility, but with the assessing gaze of someone sizing up an opponent. Caroline's hand rested lightly on her chair, her posture calm, her eyes steady as a still lake. Carter opened the discussion with a question that cut to the heart of the debate. Is education about degrees, articulation, or practical action? Caroline spoke first, her voice clear and deliberate. Education is about clarity, she said. It's when you can speak so anyone understands, without needing to flaunt credentials. I've worked with people who never attended prestigious colleges, but when they spoke, everyone listened. That's real education, persuading, not impressing. She paused, letting her words settle, her gaze sweeping the audience. Carter turned to Jasmine, his eyes expectant. You've called education a bridge of experience. Who gets to define true intelligence? Jasmine leaned forward slightly, her voice low but firm. Education shouldn't be a wall because of how someone speaks. It should be a door, opened by what you've lived and learned. Her words carried the weight of someone who'd seen barriers firsthand, and a few audience members nodded, their faces reflecting recognition. Caroline interjected, her tone light but pointed. Sounds like a quote from a self-help book. Scattered laughter broke out, mostly from the right side, though a few older attendees exchanged uncertain glances. A student in the front row looked down, lips twitching as if unsure whether to laugh or frown. Carter, ever the diplomat, shifted gears, citing a statistic. Only 35% of rural Americans hold a college degree. Yet their voices make up less than 6% of political forums. Who gets to define true intelligence? He pressed. Jasmine's smile sharpened. The media often mistakes Polish for understanding. We can't let public spaces be dominated by slick speeches where confidence is mistaken for correctness. Her words, though polite, were aimed at Caroline, who tilted her head slightly, unfazed, as if accustomed to such jabs. The audience stirred, some fidgeting not out of boredom, but as if sensing an invisible thread tightening in the room. Jasmine continued, her tone measured but pointed. I don't dismiss clear speech, but when you represent a community and talk like you're at a press conference, I worry intelligence is being misunderstood. Her words landed like a pebble on glass, the sound lingering. Caroline didn't respond immediately, her gaze dropping to the table before lifting again, calm and composed. In the back row, the denim-jacketed student sat motionless, his hand resting on a small canvas bag. He opened it slowly, pulling out a folded piece of paper with worn edges and a faint blue ink smudge. No one noticed, but a camera panning the audience lingered on him, capturing the intensity in his unwavering gaze. Carter adjusted his microphone, sensing the debate's pivotal moment approaching. He turned to Jasmine. You've said education is a bridge of experience. Have you ever been accused of being too emotional instead of academic? Jasmine nodded, unfazed. Many times, often by people who think knowledge is something only they own. Soft laughs rang out, not entirely supportive, but from those who recognized the truth in her words. Caroline sat up straighter, her lips curving into a slight smile, as if she'd been waiting for an opening. So, how do you define critical thinking when talking to your community? Caroline asked, her tone light but sharp. Jasmine didn't flinch. Critical thinking is questioning even what you believe most, she replied, her voice calm but resolute. A few audience members nodded, their faces reflecting agreement. Caroline spread her hands, her tone teasing. Sounds nice, like a Monday morning social media quote. The remark drew a chuckle, but it also shifted the room's atmosphere, as if the debate was veering off script. Carter redirected the conversation, citing a survey. 60% of young people in rural areas feel undervalued in political discussions because their speech isn't standard. He turned to Caroline. Have you ever felt that way? Caroline's expression softened, and she leaned forward. I had a high school teacher in New Hampshire. She asked me to present an idea to the class. When I stumbled, she didn't correct my words. She just asked, "Do you understand what you just said?" If I said yes, she'd say, "That's enough." The auditorium fell silent, not out of disinterest, but because her words carried the weight of something deeply personal. Jasmine's eyes shifted to Carter, then past the camera, as if sensing the audience's attention drifting. In the back row, the student leaned forward slightly, the folded paper in his hand now half open. Carter pressed Jasmine. You've said some leaders use polish to hide a lack of logical thinking. Can you elaborate? Jasmine didn't hesitate. I'm not saying they're ignorant. I'm saying they're good at polishing words. But when asked to reason clearly, they pivot to emotional stories. Carter turned to Caroline. You emphasize clarity, but do you rely on logic or prepared lines? Before Caroline could answer, Jasmine leaned forward, her gaze steady. For example, can you explain the difference between analytical and creative thinking? A soft ripple of murmurs spread through the audience, not because the question was difficult, but because it felt like a test. Caroline didn't hesitate. Analytical thinking breaks down facts to reach a logical conclusion. Creative thinking finds solutions from new perspectives. But if you think education is just about defining terms, you've never been in a classroom where students work extra hours to afford books. Her words cut through the room, sharp yet quiet. The student in the back gripped the paper tighter, not out of tension, but as if her words had stirred something familiar. Jasmine smiled subtly. You tell a story. Where I grew up, stories don't replace arguments. A small laugh broke from the third row, and Jasmine's eyes flicked toward the sound, sensing the audience leaning her way. The debate continued, each speaker holding her ground, but the air in the auditorium felt heavier, as if something unspoken was building. Then, without warning, the denim-jacketed student stood. No security moved. No announcement was made. He stepped into the center aisle, stopping 5 steps from the stage, where the spotlight barely touched his shoulder. Every eye turned to him. Carter didn't speak. Jasmine's arms crossed lightly, her eyes fixed on him. Caroline met his gaze, unflinching. "Excuse me," he said, his voice clear, not loud but steady. "I'm not a speaker, but I want to read a letter I wrote to Miss Levitt." The auditorium fell silent. He unfolded the paper, its edges frayed, the blue ink smudged in one corner. "Miss Levitt," he began, his voice steady, as if speaking from a place deeper than nerves. "I wrote this while preparing my college scholarship application. I didn't know where to start, because in my family, no one had ever done this. I'm the son of a car mechanic. My dad only finished 10th grade in our New Hampshire town. People said not to speak too complexly, because that's showing off. But when I heard you on TV, I saw someone who spoke clearly, confidently, yet still felt like someone from my town." Jasmine's mocking smile faded. Caroline closed her eyes briefly, taking a deep breath. The student continued. "I quoted you in my scholarship essay. I wrote, 'Education isn't about leaving your hometown. It's about learning to bring knowledge back without losing yourself.' When I got the scholarship, I received a short email. It said, 'I don't care about your grades. I just want you to remember no one is wrong for speaking in their own voice.'" A sniffle came from the second row, though no one could pinpoint its source. He read the final line. "If anyone here thinks Miss Levitt doesn't represent real education, they should know she was the first person to make me believe I could learn and speak up without changing who I am." The silence that followed was profound, not the pause of waiting, but the stillness of realization. Jasmine didn't respond. Carter's hands fell from the table, clasped together. Caroline placed a hand on her chest, where she kept things too precious to display. The student folded the paper, returned to his seat, and sat down, avoiding everyone's gaze. But every eye remained on him, not for his action, but for what it evoked. The memory of a moment when someone believed in them. The debate didn't resume immediately. Carter called for a brief break, but no one left their seats. The stage lights dimmed, and a gentle silence wove through the room. When the discussion resumed, Caroline spoke, her voice even but weighty. I used to not know what I was saying, and that lasted through my early college years. I read books, but didn't understand. I memorized, but was afraid to ask questions. I nodded because I feared looking incompetent. She paused, letting the words resonate. I had a teacher in New Hampshire, older than my mother, who taught a class called Communication for Those Who Think They're Not Enough. She didn't start with a textbook. She asked, "Has anyone here ever felt they weren't allowed to speak?" I raised my hand. She didn't praise or encourage. She just asked why. The audience leaned in, their eyes lingering on her. I said, "Because I thought smart people don't need to ask again." She looked at me and said, "The ones who don't ask stop learning." Then she added, "If you pass a test without understanding, you don't win. You're just trained, so others don't have to deal with your ignorance." A subtle wave of nods spread through the room. Caroline continued, "From that day, I started asking. I asked about things I thought I knew. I even asked things I feared would embarrass me. I still learn slower, write less fluently, speak imperfectly. But I've never sat next to someone without trying to understand them." Jasmine remained silent, her gaze fixed on the stage lights. The student's letter had shifted the room's energy, and her earlier jabs seemed to lose their edge. The debate concluded without fanfare. No one clapped loudly or declared a winner. The audience left quietly, carrying the weight of the moment. In the days that followed, the student's letter became the story. A video from the auditorium's secondary camera, unedited and unscored, spread online under an anonymous account called Unsent Letters. It showed the student reading, his voice steady, the paper worn. Shared over 120,000 times, it carried captions like, "I wish I'd written a letter like that to my third-grade teacher," or, "The best question I was ever asked was, 'Do you understand?'" In Raleigh, North Carolina, a high school teacher printed the letter, placing copies on students' desks with a note, "If you've never written a letter to someone, today's a good day to start." In Boise, Idaho, a community college dean redesigned the first day for freshmen, asking them to write to the person who first made them believe they could learn. Responses poured in. A grandmother who asked, "What did you learn today?" despite being illiterate. A street vendor who taught a child to count money without mocking mistakes. An education podcast in Oregon launched a series called The Unnamed Teacher, collecting stories of mentors who taught without fanfare. A colleague who explained a payslip. A neighbor who taught "thank you" in Spanish. A father who never mocked wrong answers. In Manchester, New Hampshire, a library exhibit titled Unsent Letters displayed notes pinned to the walls. "To my first-grade teacher, you didn't scold me for misspelling. I still remember." "To the coffee shop worker, you taught me how to smile at tough customers." Jasmine Crockett didn't seek the spotlight after the event. When asked why, her team responded, "I don't need to be remembered. I just need someone to remember the first person who made them feel worthy of being taught." Caroline faced no backlash either. At later forums, audiences stopped asking about her degrees, instead asking, "Who did you learn from?" She paused, as if the question wasn't in her bio, then answered with stories of teachers who asked her to understand, not just perform. A college student posted a photo of a classroom whiteboard with the words, "No new lesson today. Today, we write things we never said." Taped below was the student's letter, with a handwritten note. "I'm still learning, but I no longer think I'm lacking." The Unsent letters account never revealed the student's identity, though a blurry backstage photo showed him standing with Caroline, who handed him a note. "This is the question I was once afraid to ask. You just taught me how to ask it in my own voice." No controversy erupted. No support groups formed. The story wasn't about winning a debate, but about sparking stories of those who taught others to rise. A seventh grader in Burlington, Vermont, wrote to her math teacher, "You always asked, 'What do you think about this problem?' I didn't get it then, but now I know that's how to learn." A mother shared how her village school teacher, barely literate, nodded without shame as she read. Daniel Carter, asked why he didn't intervene during Jasmine's challenges, said, "I did that once in another program and stole someone's chance to be heard. This time, I stayed silent, and I learned the right thing." A retired teacher in Salem, Oregon wrote, "I used to think I taught wrong. No fancy words, no slides. But that student's letter showed me the only thing I taught right was asking, 'Do you understand?'" The story of the Marshall Auditorium wasn't about who spoke loudest or argued best. It was about a letter, written on frayed paper, that reminded people of the teachers who saw them, asked them to understand, and made them believe they deserved to learn. It was about the power of sincerity, the courage to stand, and the quiet question, "Do you understand?" that changes everything.